Hello all, hope you're having a nice day so far. I'm still laid up in bed unfortunately after this op, but it's not stopping me from producing some content. In fact, I've got a bit of extra time now, which is great. So here we go. I've talked before about how we, in my opinion, are living through a tumultuous period in human history, and that in 1,000 years' time, historians will still be talking about the year 2020 and analysing what happened, and it will go down in history as a momentous year. I do think that we are in the middle of a social, health, and economic revolution. Don't quite know where that is going to end up, but we are currently undergoing massive change, and I think we're only at the start of that. I also think as well we are about to undergo a media revolution as well, and I think the primary reason for that is now there is increasing resentment in the public at what they see as a mainstream media that not only doesn't represent them and isn't accountable to them, but is biased, is ideological, is too left wing, too political, too obsessed with identity politics, and is tantamount to a propaganda machine, particularly the BBC. And I think people are starting to wake up to this now. And ultimately, tied in with everything else that's going on and the massive upheaval to people's lives and the amount of fear that's out there, I think we are on the verge of an uprising, a revolution, which I think in the next 2 or 3 months we're going to see that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the US election in a minute as well, and the absolute importance of that. It's the most important election in any of our lives, whether we're American or not. Now let's talk about the BBC, because if people went onto them with the Brexit coverage over the last few years, I think people are now, with increasing numbers of people. Sorry, I'm just sitting up a little bit. Increasing numbers of people anyway are cottoning on to exactly what the BBC is and who they represent. Answer: not many of us. Now, the broadcast media that is publicly funded, such as the BBC, has a responsibility to be accountable and to represent all the public in a way that the newspapers don't, especially the private-owned newspapers. They have a right to have a political angle, a political ideology if they want, and to center their editorial and journalistic content around that. In saying that, I want to use an example of one paper and how that's become so far detached from reality now, and how the mainstream media is dangerously following in that trend. And the paper I'm talking about is The Guardian, which allegedly is supposed to, be a bastion of liberalism. It's far from it. It is very, very suspicious of any dissenting voices. It's patronising. It's pretty hostile in its coverage. It's very hectoring in its tone and patronising. Maybe it should be called the Moral Guardian. Now, this in itself isn't a problem, other than it's actually sabotaging itself, and that's reflected in its readership figures. Because once you have a political position and a set of values, well, that is absolutely necessary. But in order to be taken seriously, you've also occasionally got to let in the other side and expose the other side of the view in order to reinforce what your main narrative is. And The Guardian have forgotten that. Hence, they're not taken very seriously. That in itself isn't a problem. It is a problem when an organisation, an omnipresent organisation such as the BBC, is following a similar tack, which it is. Now, the BBC, I always thought was there to educate, inform and entertain, not to patronise, lecture and moralise, because that's what it does. I think it's lost all semblance of attempts at non-bias, at non-partisanship and balance. And it increasingly doesn't even seem to try to represent certain groups and demographics. Men, Northerners, people who are BIME, non-feminists, Brexiteers, and Trump supporters. It's not representative at all. And I would actually encourage anybody to look into the legal ways at which they can cancel their TV licence, or just cancel it if you don't watch any live TV anymore. Now, this is a problem, though, because of the BBC and the propaganda that it spewed out this year. And its message of fear and its narrative of fear has cut through with a lot of people, many of who, though, are now waking up and realise that they've been lied to. Many have still got to go through that process, but I'm sure that they will do. It's a problem when you have such an all-powerful media organisation. It's nothing more than a spin machine, a propaganda machine, spewing poison and fear at the public 24 hours a day. The British public, I would say, has always been a conservative with a small c, probably why more often than not it elects conservative governments. And the BBC is not reflective of that. It's a similar situation in America, but America's probably broadly even more not conservative, it's more capitalist. There's even more capitalistic tendencies than the UK. Yet CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, again, massive media organisations dominated by left-wing groupthink and identity politics. It's exactly the same over there. And people now have had enough. There's only so much that people will put up with until they finally get to the point where hopefully a peaceful uprising. I think we are on the verge of an uprising. I wouldn't rule out a violent uprising, unfortunately, because there are so many issues now that people have with the way that society is, many of which have been created by the rise of neo-Marxist and neo-communist organisations and agencies and media has infiltrated positions of power right across the board. Schools, academia, media, Hollywood, even the Conservative Party, which in December 2019 was elected by a small c Conservative population, albeit many of those first-time Labour Conservative voters lending their vote to Boris Johnson, who've been let badly down as it's lurched towards extreme socialism. So it seems to make sense now that a BBC is very socialist, communist in its outlook, seems to be pretty well aligned with a Conservative Party that is bizarrely lurched towards communism itself. And this is a worry. Now, unlike Boris Johnson, who has proven himself to be a coward and to be anything, one thing he's not, it's a leader. The same doesn't apply to Donald Trump in America. And I have a theory about Trump, whether you like him or not, or whether you tolerate him or not. I have a feeling he will go down in history well. I think history will reflect very, very well on him. And I also think he is the most unfairly represented figure in the entire world. He sabotaged absolutely every single opportunity. And his treatment by the media is hostile to the point of it's unbelievable. The media has become so myopic towards Trump that they can't bear to utter a single, they can't bear to credit him with absolutely anything at all. And I think people can see through that, because there's no such thing as any politician who's almost never exclusively all bad. Just as there's no such thing as a politician who's an unmitigated success. The argument has to be made in circles such as the BBC, CNN, etc., etc., etc. If only on occasion, the good things that Trump has done in its present presidency, primarily not interfering in a militaristic way in the Middle East, but instead making positive impact in a diplomatic sense in the Middle East. Very, very unfairly represented. Now, I think a lot of voters can see through. They're not stupid. And I've begun to question so much myself this year as well. I look at the way that the Trump is portrayed compared to somebody, say, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. And I imagine what the media coverage would be of of Donald Trump, if he would have implemented in response to the coronavirus threat or alleged threat. If he would have implemented the measures that Jacinda Ardern had done, because you can bet your bottom dollar he would have been absolutely vilified and castigated for it. Are the dark figures and the dangerous figures being portrayed as the good guys? And are the ones who will ultimately go down in history, I think, like Trump, being portrayed as the bad guys? And if so, how many people are falling for it? And how many people are seeing through it? And I guess the answer is that we're going to find out on, is it November the 3rd, I think, the 2020 US election. We will find out exactly where the American people stand on the issue of Trump. I think if Joe Biden wins this election, that is exceptionally bad news. It's terrifying for the rest of the world, because the Democrats, just as the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party in the UK, have lurched to an extreme left-wing position, obsessed with niche issues that are not of concern to 90% of the population. So the Democrats have in the US, except even more so. And I think their links to fascist organisations, let's call them what they are. I speak my truth. And I know that when I say this, a lot of other people agree with me, so I will speak on behalf of you. Organisations such as Antifa and Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion, who are authoritarian, are intolerant, are vicious and nasty and ill-informed and ignorant. And they're not progressive and they're not liberal. I think they're too closely allied and affiliated to the Democratic Party, Democrats, for the American people to stomach. And here's the interesting thing, even though now the odds are pretty much the same, Trump and Biden are both evens to win the election, the polls still suggest that Joe Biden is going to win. I think Trump will win to a very large degree. I really do, which will beg the question, if it does happen, after a number of Conservative wins that in the UK that were out of context with the polling before it, after the win for Brexit, which was out of context with the poll before that, and after the win for Trump, which is out of context with the polls before the last US election. If again Trump wins, and everything that the media is trying to portray and engineer doesn't come to pass, what does that say about how free speech is under threat in the West, in Europe and in America? Why are people not feeling confident to say to pollsters that they intend to vote for Trump? Why does the average man on the street not feel comfortable saying that they like Trump or they prefer Trump, that they voted Brexit, that they voted for the Conservative Party, that they think that global warming may be a myth, that they think that coronavirus is a hoax, that they think that coronavirus is at the very least being massively exaggerated and there may be something else at play? What does that again say about where we are when it comes to freedom of speech in our world today? I guess we're going to find out, and I think the tipping point is soon to be reached, because you can only keep people will only put up with so much. I'm absolutely amazed with particularly what the British people are putting up with at the moment. Still got faith in them. I think sometimes that it takes a change in somebody's circumstances for the way their outlook on the world will change. I think when a lot of the furlough schemes end in October and winter arrives and a lot of people are out of a job, then what's been staring them in the face all along will smack them across the face, and they'll suddenly see this for what it really is: a media engineered disease, a media engineered virus. And in the US, I think the tipping point will be the US election, which will deliver a landslide for Trump, which will ultimately represent two fingers up yet again to the establishment, to the Democrats and to the mainstream media. And all of this is going to precipitate a revolution in our media. So, where else are we? Yes, this next election is the most important in the history of the modern world. I really do truly believe that. I would be absolutely terrified if Biden won, because I think that would put the rubber stamp on the neo-communist takeover of the world. You may think that's a conspiracy theory, but don't call something a conspiracy theory unless you've engaged with the idea first. Just call it a theory. I do think that the many positions of power, most positions of power in society are across the arts, across media, across public sector, across Hollywood, and even a Conservative Party in this country with a majority of 80 have been infiltrated by communists. I think if Biden wins, then that's a sad day for all of humanity. I really, really do. And the other interesting thing, and I'm not gonna give any detail on this. It's worth doing some research and try to work out why it may be that there is this utter level of hatred and vitriol for Trump. And whether it is hatred or whether it's fear about what Trump, if he is unleashed in his second term as president, is going to be able to expose pure evil. I'm saying no more on that, but there's plenty of information out there for you to get your teeth into, and these questions are very, very important for everybody to start asking. And I do have a gut instinct that I think Trump will win. I think he'll win significantly. And I think something absolutely massive is going to happen in the months following his presidency, but say no more. The House of Cards is about to come tumbling down now when it comes to where people stand. People are beginning to wake up to what organisations such as the BBC and CNN, to the amount of disproportionate power that they have, what it is that they stand for, and the poison that they're injecting into society every single day. People are waking up to that now, and we are getting to that point, to that tipping point, and it's going to happen very soon. The UK and the US, the silent majority, which is always there, always has been there, which I actually, until recently, include myself as part of that. You know, the ones who just keep their heads down, say nothing, try and make their voices heard at the ballot box. I think, unfortunately, that isn't enough now. There needs to be a slightly more assertive battle taking place on an everyday basis now against this increasingly powerful left-wing authoritarianism and fascism. There is, opposite to that, of course, as well, a threat from the right, but is nowhere near as pervading and omnipresent as the threat from the left. And they certainly don't hold positions of power to anywhere near the same degree. So that's where I think that's pretty much where we are, and that's what I've got to say, really. I think that's all my notes done. I think the media is trying to engineer a win for Biden. I think the American people are too clever, really, to countenance that because of the inherent dangers that will bring. I think they're prepared to give Trump another chance to rebuild the economy again. I don't think this will be an election centred on COVID. I think it will be an election centred on disenchantment, general disenchantment in society, and the grip that the political and the media establishment has over the narrative in society as well, and people feeling that their voices aren't being heard and they're not being respected, and that will deliver Trump a healthy victory And I think that is what the world needs. Even if you don't agree with me, and that's fine. That's what I think is going to happen. I think we're in for an interesting next 6 months, and get ready for it. But definitely stay healthy. Stay healthy over the next 6 months, because things are going to get fraught. They're going to get challenging. But I think with a Trump win, ultimately, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, I'll speak to you all soon. Don't forget to subscribe if you like my content. If you don't like my content, don't subscribe. But if you do, hit the subscribe button. That'd be great. I'd really appreciate it. Have a nice rest of the day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.